What's going on, everybody? Time for another Brain Dead review. Today we're going to be talking about Arkona with their album Khram, and I'm about to butcher a lot of words in Russian in this video. So if that's not entertaining, then I don't know what is. Khram is the 9th album from Moscow band Arkona. You see that it is 74 minutes in length with only 9 tracks. And at that, the opening and the closing tracks are not really songs, they're just little pieces of atmosphere setting things. Right off the bat, we start off this album with a very weird, like chanting, children, creepy setting thing, and you kind of know what you're going to be getting into here right off the bat. This band is primarily black and folk metal, but you hear all kinds of different influences in here. Mostly, for the most part though, you're going to hear black metal and folk metal. They have got all kinds of different instruments going on here, and that's primarily because of the folk metal influence. They have different kinds of flutes and whistles. They got acoustic guitar, they had piano, electronic drums on a track. It sounds like, I'm not really sure if that's exactly what it is, but that's what it sounds like. Either way, they've got all kinds of different sounds going on here. It's really incredible how well they are able to put them together and make it sound great. So after their little opening of chanting scary children, we get Storm, and right off the bat, you understand that this band is definitely black metal and they're definitely folk metal. Like I was just saying, you get bagpipes in this. I forgot to mention they have bagpipes on this album. They've got bagpipes, they've got a couple different whistle sounding instruments on there. Different kinds of whistles, I'm not really sure. Just doing research, it looks like they've got a decent number of different things that are mostly played by the band members. However, the piano, I know, is played by a guest musician. Regardless, they had them on the album, so we got to talk about them too. So right off the bat, we get Storm, like I said, and it's a normal length track. I think maybe like a little over 4 minutes long. But like I said earlier, this album is 74 minutes long. Basically call it 70 minutes by the time you take out the opening and the closing little things of this album. They're not songs, they're literally just an opener and a closer for the album. So really, you're talking about 70 minutes of music in 7 tracks. That sounds overwhelming. It sounds like each song would be completely overwhelming and would take forever to get used to from how long they are. Storm is not that way. Like I said, it's a shorter track. It's probably the shortest track on the album. I didn't check to see what is, but this is probably it, because it's followed up by Celuya Zizin. Like I said, I'm going to butcher a lot of these things, but it's the second actual song. It's considered the 3rd track on the album. This song is 17 minutes long, and I know that's going to turn a lot of people off instantly and say, I don't think you can do songs that long very well, or at least most bands cannot pull something off like that, because it's such a daunting task to write a 17-minute song. And what I think is great about this, it's the 2nd song on the album. Normally, that would be like your closing track, where you would end the album on just a grand, super long track like Iron Maiden did on The Book of Souls with Empire of the Clouds. That track is about 18 minutes long. You'd think that that's where bands would save something like this, is for the end. Nope. Not Arkona. They got that right there, the 2nd song on the album. I'm going to hit on several points that apply to a lot of tracks on this album, because the information carries over, because it's relevant to keeping a long song interesting. And like I said, there's quite a few on here. This one just happens to be the longest. Some things the band did well to make sure that these songs were not boring and that they stayed interesting the whole time is, it doesn't really follow one absolute same idea most of the time throughout the entire track. the band does lots of stuff with their black metal sound and with their folk metal sound. And just like on the second one on the track, I'm not pronouncing it correctly anyways, even when I try. They have some really beautiful, clean vocals on this track, which comes from their folk metal side of things. But I wouldn't even entirely credit it that. It's more of the band bringing in like a traditional heavy metal influence here. It reminds me more of something like that. The first thing I actually thought of when hearing this was the Satan's Hallow self-titled album from just this last year that I just talked about on my top albums of 2017. If you've heard that album, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about here, especially because both of those singers are also female, so that you can get those similarities from there as well. Now the track that follows that one is called Rebianak Bez Imeni. And this shows that sometimes the band really just wants to write a folk metal song. This song is mostly folk metal. There is, I believe, some really fast blast beats that sound a lot more black metal in this, and there is still little bits of black metal. Like, they never fully abandon any of their key sounds for any track, but this track is mostly folk. That's one thing that I think they did a really good job with on this album, was on the songwriting. The songwriting is spot on. They didn't just say, we're going to write a bunch of tracks that are 50-50, half black metal, half folk metal. They have some that are mostly one or the other. This one's mostly folk. There's some other tracks that lean more towards black, and then there's some that just mesh them really well together. And so that's my favorite thing, I think, about this album, is just the grand songwriting that you get from it. And then you have a track, V Pogoni za Beloj Tinya, which, like I said, I think this one is using some electronic drums or some kind of different sounding percussion instrument aside from just their traditional drums. I really like in this track, they do a good job with the part of black metal that is all about creating an atmosphere. This track does a really good job of that and shows that they are capable of doing anything black metal with the best of them, including what is so important in black metal is creating atmosphere. And this track shows that they can do that with the best of them. Now, I mentioned earlier they feature a guest musician to play piano on the album. We get that in the track Vi La Doña Bogav, which opens with a really interesting piano piece. Then the piano kind of goes away for some of the track, then comes back a few minutes later, and it's the lead instrument again, and creating it's really more like a bridge for a second. Like, the piano is bridging two parts of the song together, and it just works really, really well. Then we get the last track on the album, Volchitsa, probably butchered that one too. Opens with some really interesting, like, Indian chant style vocals. There's probably much better words for it than that, but when you hear it, you're gonna understand why I would say it that way. It's, again, the band using something, you didn't hear that in any of the rest of the album. Now we get to the final track, and you have, once again, something else new. They're throwing in something else, a new kind of sound that you had not heard on the rest of the album. The variety of things that this band does to keep the album interesting is so spot on and great, because they had to. This album could have been a disaster, quite honestly, if they had not done this. With daring to go in and write so many long tracks on one album, it could have been a complete disaster. However, they pulled it off damn well. Probably my favorite part on the album is towards the end of Volchista. You get this bridge that is really led by the drums, and then in comes this beautiful sounding whistle. Like I said, they have a lot of different whistles on the album. They bring in this whistle that follows the drums, and then after that, the guitar comes in and follows what the whistle had been doing. Coming in with the drum bridge, it's nothing, revolutionary or groundbreaking, but having it followed by the whistle becomes the lead instrument at that point. Then the guitar comes in and follows what the whistle had been doing and continues and takes the track to its closing notes from there. And they just did it so well. That moment, the ending of that track, really showed off all the best assets of the band to me right there at the end. Their songwriting ability of using folk instruments and black metal instruments pulled off really well. The guitar and everything carries the track to the end, and then we get the closer of the album, which is more of the creepy sounding, like witch or evil children, or I don't know what it is. It's creepy though. It's a nice closer for the album. Fortunately, the ending creepy part does not last quite as long as the first one, which is one of my only complaints about the album. The opening part that they did lasts a little bit too long, but other than that, man, it's just the music is so damn good. And right now, I will say this is now my favorite album of 2018 so far. I'm gonna give this album a 9.5 out of 10. It is damn near perfection, and I highly, highly recommend it to anyone who thinks that they might even have a chance at liking this kind of music. And if you already like black metal, if you already like folk metal, if you already like metal in general, you need to give this album a chance. The screeching black metal style vocals may be one of the only things that you have a hard time getting used to, but this very well could be your gateway album into that, because they did it so well. Everything else around that is great that it's gonna make it easier for you to get used to it. I promise you. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to stay up to date with all the albums I'll be reviewing, and follow me on the social medias as well to keep up to date with even more albums that I didn't even have time to make videos for, because there's gonna be more of them in there than there will be even videos up on the channel. So if you want to stay up to date on rock and metal music, stay right here.